All right, everybody, welcome to Chapter 13 of AFDA. And in this chapter, we're going to take a little departure from what we've done previously. Um, as you can see, the course itself is really 3 courses in one. It's algebra, functions, and data analysis. Well, we've done the algebra and the functions portions of the class, so now we're going to do the data analysis. And in 13, we're really just going to describe data. And you can see a lot of these things you already know. In A, measures of central tendency. Basically, what's the average, mean, median, mode. In B, we're going to describe data using other things such as the way it varies. Range, variance, z-score, standard deviation. And then in C, you're going to kind of plot data, stem and leaf, box plots, and something called a 5-number summary. So we're going to try to do this all in one video. It might take 2 or 3, but we'll see. But first of all, central tendency, part A. So central tendency is when I have a set of data, and for this whole video and probably the rest of them, the set of data that's easiest to talk about is you guys take a test as a class, and each individual score in that test, so your score, versus how the class as a whole did. So a central tendency measure would be, as a teacher, how did most of my kids do? Well, there we're talking about mean, median, and mode. And that's what we're going to do first. Now, the second part, variation, I'm not concerned about how the average was. I'm not concerned with what most people did. I'm concerned more about the outliers. You know, were there kids that score 100? Were there kids that scored 0? I'm concerned about those, the ends of the data. And then C, can we read a stem and leaf in a box plot? So, in part A, this is the first question. We're going to talk about, let's take a look. Find the mean, median, mode, and mid-range. So let's define each of those. The mean. And give me 1 second, because my board definitely needs fix there. Okay. So the mean is, how do we want to write this? Probably that's the best definition. The sum of the numbers divided by how many numbers there are. So in this case, to find the mean, we would add up each number. And I get 106. And there are 12 total numbers. So we're going to divide that by 12. And we're going to say that the range, or the mean, the mean is 8.83. Okay, the median and the mode are a little different. The median is the middle number. But we got to remember that the median is the middle number when they are put in order. The mode is the most occurring. And the mid-range, the range, first of all, is high minus low. Well, the mid-range is something a little different than that. It's high minus low, divide by 2. Or just the range over 2. So these are our formulas now. And you can see I've kind of paused for a second here because I don't want to be able to write all these out. And what I mean by that is to do the median and to do the mid-range, I'm going to have to put this data in order from least to greatest. And really to do mode, I'm going to need that too. So rather than write all of these out, in fact, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this as well. Here's my definitions. Let's take to our calculator, because our calculator will do a lot of this for us, and it's just a matter of knowing how to type it in and then how to read it. So let's bring up our calculator. And our first step is something you guys have done. We're going to go to our statistics menu, and we're going to edit it because we're going to type in every single number there. Like so. And it's a good idea just to kind of cycle through and make sure we didn't skip anything. Looks pretty good. Now we're going to go to calculate, but I want to go, instead of our regression equations, which is what we used before, I want to go to one variable statistics. And what this does is it's going to bring up every single statistical measure that our calculator will give us. So what I'm going to do is just copy that here. And then if there's actually more, we can hit down and it brings up the rest of them. And there's really more here. And there's a lot going on in this. So let's paste this so we can see it. So a couple of things before I come back to what this is. I can scroll up or down and see all of these values because there's so many values our calculator gives. And actually, most of what we want is going to be in here rather than using a formula. So hopefully you already see the very first one there is our mean. The average is the X with a bar over it, or just X bar. And that means average. Now, these are all a little different here. Whoops, sorry. These are all a little different, but there's nothing here that we need just yet. However, if you're curious, this is how much they all are added up. So this is the sum. And then this is if you were to square each term and then add that up. This is a value that we'll talk about in a couple minutes. It's called standard deviation. On the bottom here, right here's our median. And now we got a couple of things. We have the maximum and the minimum. So while we still have to do a little bit of work, the range is high minus low. And then the mid-range is high minus low divided by 2. And in this case, it'd be 4.5. So you can see our calculator will give us all of this data, this wonderful data, and we just have to know how to interpret that. And that's going to start us off. Now, you're going to have to do this several different ways. Obviously, you're not just going to use a calculator for everything. So in this one, we've got what's called a frequency distribution. And what it says is that they did a survey, like so, and this is, again, a class average, so we're talking test scores. And what they found was that 6 people scored between a 90 and 98, 22 people scored between 99 and 107, 43 scored here, 28 scored here, and 9 scored here. What I want you to do is find the mean, median, mode, and all that. But we can't really do a whole lot because I don't know the exact numbers. So we're going to limit this to find the mean and the modal class. So the idea of mode, which I actually forgot to put on here, the mode of this, you would just have to look, and the mode here will be 8. So let's not forget that mode does exist. Here, the modal class is the class that has the most data. So the modal class is right here. So you would just write that the modal class is between 108 and 116. To actually calculate the mean, we're going to do what's called a weighted mean. But first, we need to change these class limits into just one number. So to change those class minutes or class limits to one number, we're just going to find the average of each one. So rather than say the class limit is 90 to 98, we're just going to say that's 94. And we're going to say, all right, 6 people scored a 94. Not quite accurate, but we're doing sampling and statistics, so it's okay to be a little bit, rounding. And each time, I'm just going to find, whoops, the average of each one. So you see I've eliminated that, and all I've done with those class limits is add them up and divide by 2. But now I can do something a little easier with it. So what do I really have here? Well, what I have is that 94, the score of 94 was scored 6 times. I have that 103 was done 22 times. 112 was 43 times. 121 was 28 times. And 130 was 9 times. And what we're going to do is add all of that up, because the mean is still all the values added up divided by the total. Now, when I add these up, this is going to be a minute. I get that this adds up to that. Now I need to divide by the total. Well, the total is 108. So I'm going to take this and divide it by 108 so I can get my average. And the average score on this test was 116.58. So that's what it looks like in a frequency distribution. So we're not actually giving every individual score, we're just kind of rounding that. And for our class, well, this could be the same thing, only this is A, B, C, D, F. And we could do it that way. That's something that a lot of teachers will use because it's called, a class distribution of grades. I want to know how many kids have an A, B, C, D. I don't care the difference between a 91 and 99. I just want to know the A, B, C, D. Okay, and then here is something a little different. This is still a weighted mean, and it's still a frequency distribution. I gave you 3 columns because now I've got 3 different distributions here. Not distributions, 3 different categories. So the number sold, so each car, I have the number sold of A and how much they sold for. And all I want is the weighted mean of the price. So I actually don't really care about this column at all. I just want the weighted mean of all cars that are sold. And that's just going to be the last 2 columns. This column is just kind of telling you what type of car each one is. So I'm going to take my 10,000 times 8, my 12,000 times 10 and my 8,000 times 12. And this will be the sum of all the values. And I get that 296,000 and when I divide it, the total average is 98,066. Okay. In 4, you can see we're going to do the exact same problem. Find the mean, median, mode, mid-range. So I'm not going to worry about 4, but you can see in 4, here's why I want to use the calculator, because the calculator is going to give me a much easier way of entering all these in. So why don't you take a second and pause the video and make sure that you can do this, and I'll bring up the answers here in a second. Okay, so I put here what my calculator gives me as I enter all this stuff. And there's quite a bunch of information here, so let's go through it. So the mean is 20.75. The median is 20. The mid-range would be 25 plus 17 divided by 2. Oh, I'm sorry, 25 minus 17. And I get 4. Oops, and I'm sorry. It is plus. So the mid-range is high plus low. And I think I said that wrong earlier on, so let's correct that. Yeah. So when I come back here, let's fix this right now. It's not the range for mid-range. It's high plus low over 2. So be careful there. That is the mid-range, and it's not quite the range. So that means here on this first one, the mid-range is not 4.5. It'd be 21. It's 10.5 because it would be high plus low over 2. Sorry about that. Okay. So back here, 42 is my mid-range. Now, you can see I'm going to do some other stuff here. First of all, I sorted my list. And what I'm able to do there, let me bring up the calculator so you can see it. The sort button is right above the stat where it's under list. So instead of hitting stat, if I go to second stat, here's each list. And actually, if I go to the operations, here's my sort ascending or sort descending. And then I could just plug in L1, and what it says, it's done. But when I come back to my list, you can see, oh, my list is nice and organized. The reason I do that is because the mode is a lot easier to see now. That the mode of 20 occurs 5 times. So the mode here is 20. Now, you're more than welcome to count that out manually. That's fine. But I did want to illustrate that your calculator will do this for you. Okay. So I'm going to stop the video there because we're getting a little long. And in part B, when we come back, we'll do the next standard deviation. All right. We'll see you soon.